Today Africa Podcast is a podcast series where we interview African entrepreneurs and professionals and share the stories behind their businesses. In each interview, we ask how they got started, how they grew, and how they run their business today. The stories are inspiring and also provide specific advice and insight into starting a business. By sharing these stories, we want to help others get started.
Tell me more about yourself.
My name is John. I'm the founder of Safiri Salama, basically co-founder. There are two other co-founders. My background is in communications. Basically, I've been a journalist, a producer, a marketer, a TV anchor, a sports commentator, then went into communication strategy and spent quite a bit doing that. And then at a ripe age of 48, decided to pivot into tech. So I will say almost over 28 years of experience in different aspects of the communication industry. So at 52, I'm embodiment that tech is not for the old. It's not for the young only. I guess it's basically what I feel. What I feel is that what I'm doing now is a collection. It's a sum of collective experiences that I've encountered in my journey as a journalist, as an advertiser, as a broadcaster, as a communication strategist. So basically, this is a culmination of that.
All right. Okay. What inspired you to start Safiri Salama, and how did you identify the need of innovation in African traditional death care industry?
We can start with it was an accidental discovery. Okay. The only thing that goes for it is that I've never been exactly traditional in my outlook. Even when I was in communication, when we ran our agency, we used to call it a guerrilla agency. Basically, we operated so much outside the mainstream. And even as a journalist, I was never fully hired. When I did the Kenyan Broadcasting Corporation, when I did Reuters, I was always a freelance because I preferred actually trying to see things a different way. Anyway, personally, I have a 24-year-old son, turning 24 this year. And when he was 18, one of the things that we were discussing, because we consider 18 to be the rite of passage year, it was that he couldn't, as he tried to find out who he was, his tribe, his ethnicity, his identity, and the issue of his grandfather came up. And my father, his grandfather, died when he was 4 years old, so he could hardly remember who he was. And the fact that he had also lived outside the country, he went to school in a neighboring country, he could hardly speak vernacular. And so his quest for identity was very important for him. And in the process, he asked some very piercing questions: who we are, what we are like, what makes him different. And the other question that came up was, what can I tell him about his grandfather, his community? And the one thing that came across was that there was very little that was taught to help him. And one of the big questions he asked is, why isn't Granddad online? Because I gave the lame excuse of, well, in 2003 when he passed on, the internet was not such a big thing. And he was like, but history is online. The rest of history is online. Okay. And so my father was a historian. And that by itself was an indictment of me having let his memory slide. So I actually looked for a couple of things I could do, like build a private website, because I'd worked in an advertising agency, so I knew all about design and stuff. However, immediately I tried to check whether there were good existing websites that could accommodate his memorial. I realized most of them were actually based so much on a Western orientation. I just put together a small website template, a WordPress template for him as a memorial website. And in the process, actually, I managed to get something that would put together his history, because he had ailed for long before he died, and he took time to actually pen down his biography in an exercise.
Wow.
So that was a good start. I mean, it was everything, including how many cows he had made for dowry for my mother, and all sorts of things and this kind of stuff. It made for very interesting reading, because he had left this book with us as a family. But once somebody is buried, we hardly go back there to actually dig in. But after putting this together, and that included now ferreting around to find these pictures, which were in all sorts of storage modes, I talked to a couple of friends about this, and they suggested, you know what, John, maybe this is a service that other people could use, because actually we all we don't store the history of our fathers and grandfathers. We normally put them in something called the funeral booklet or the memorial booklet, but after the funeral, nobody knows where it goes. And where do all those pictures? And so in asking around, people are like, why don't you actually turn this into a service that people can use? And so I reached out to different people, including a bereaved family, on would you use this? Would you use it? Because all it had was, it had a memorial where you could have pictures and notifications for when the memorial and birthdays are, and a place where to put tributes, and a place where to put pictures. But the first reaction I got when I dealt with the family was, it's important, but it's not the most important thing today. Because they were freshly bereaved, and they were like, I don't think for us storing memories would be the biggest thing we want to do now. What we are trying to do is to raise money to bury a person, coordinate people, make funeral arrangements, and basically they were more immediate about what they needed. And my thinking was, that was the first reality check on whatever idea I had. And I found that very entertaining, because that is a market check. And so what they were saying, we are used to death notices and we're used to funeral announcements. Is this a funeral announcement? And so went back into memorials, looked like a good idea, but they were suggesting we needed to announce a death, and the announcements that were existing in the market were very expensive. And so it led me into another phase of what actually were the issues around the market. You realize obituaries were so expensive, less than 10% of people were using them in newspapers and on radio. Yet one of the most important aspects of any culture in Africa is announce. The first step is to announce a death. And so we said, actually do it. But the other thing you realize, why were obituaries more expensive? Newspapers had shrunk in readership, radio stations were much more fragmented, it made it much more expensive. So people were resorting to either putting death announcements on Facebook, which were not suited for it, or putting it on WhatsApp, creating WhatsApp groups. Then something else that was coming up, people are complaining about not just the cost, but the ownership of the death notice. Most newspapers own the notice. You pay them, they float the notice for you. You want to amend it, you pay again. And so you actually don't control it.
Again.
Then something else that comes is that death notices in the newspapers and on radio are not stored in a retrievable manner. Basically, you'll find lots of radio stations read out the funeral announcements live, and most newspapers actually float it for the day and don't put an online version of it. So if you wanted to retrieve it, you actually can't. An issue came there, especially when you understood that death notices were not just about announcing a death, they were the history of a person. It detailed family members, who the person was. And so we said, why don't we create a modern version of a death notice that is digital, that's online, that is shareable, that is cheaper, and which can be owned by the family, and it's a one-off payment.
Okay.
And so that our foray into doing that, and later on we've improved it. We said, normally Africans don't really bury within cities that much in cemeteries, they bury up country. So why don't you actually provide maps for burying, for directing people who are coming for the funeral? When COVID came, it introduced the aspect of live streaming. So why don't you have your live streaming links there as well? So a couple of modifications we did to actually improve what a death notice can do. Okay. Then another issue came up when we figured out, when we talked to families and they were like, do you know what hurts us the most? It's the cost.
Okay.
The cost of finding suppliers, it's the time. It's terrible because we don't actually treat the funeral industry as a formal industry. And that means it's very fragmented. There are all sorts of suppliers in small outfits in all sorts of different places. And there are all sorts of services which you may need, but which are not actually classified as funeral services. I'll give you an example. The lawyer who writes a will is not actually seen as a member of the funeral industry. The person who actually does catering, the person who actually does event organization in Africa is not seen as part of the funeral industry. What are seen as part of the funeral industry are the people who provide the hearse, flowers, and funeral homes.
Yeah, and the caskets.
And the caskets. So we thought, and then one of the things that happened with this fragmentation, not serious marketing around it, a culture of silence in which you cannot advertise a funeral service or a product. I mean, go through mainstream media, you will never see advertisement about a funeral service.
Yeah, death is seen as a kind of a no-go area in Africa. You know, everybody's kind of scared of dying. Nobody wants to leave. Everyone wants to live here forever.
True. Yet it is the one thing that we all confront. And it's even worse than that, that when a death happens in the West, you have a funeral home to go to and a funeral director to help you plan. More like, you know, the way you do wedding planning.
Yes.
In Africa, it is friends and family planning without any prior experience around it. What that exposes them to, there's a lot of time wasted because they have to physically go to see the supplies and the products. Like funeral coffins and caskets are made on this street. You have to physically go there. And that gave us the idea about how about beyond creating this funeral platform where you can do advertise, where you can have death notices, have memorials, why can't you also have a directory of funeral service providers? We call it the Red Book. So we ended up creating 3 products: death notices, memorials, and what we are calling the Red Book. Basically, the yellow pages of the death industry, but then very extensive because it includes lawyers, people who work directly in the industry, event organizers. Oh, we even found people who make funeral outfits, mobile toilets, people who stream, event directors, counseling. Grief counseling is part of that industry. So we thought, why don't we just have this one-stop place where people can go? Because while Africa is fast adopting technology and it's helping us how we buy, how we shop, how we find items, the death industry is untouched by technology. And as such, it makes organizing a funeral a traumatic experience. 1, you don't have the experience. 2, you don't have the time because burials have to happen within a specific period, and COVID brought this home. And within that period, you've got to make very many decisions without any guide or helpline. So that's what actually created Safiri Salama for us. Safiri Salama basically in Swahili means go well or travel well. It's a common phrase used during funerals.
How did you meet your co-founders, and what convinced you that they are the right partners to work with you?
I've always been in the media industry and the media business. And that's why I told you, I think what I'm doing now is a culmination, because having worked as a freelance journalist, having worked in the newsroom, having worked in production, having worked headed an advertising agency, one of the things you learn is that the people you partner is like a marriage. And I have always tended to fall back on people I have worked with before and worked it on different kinds of assignments so that you understand their temperament, their view about building stuff, their sense of adventure. And so for me, 2 years after I started the building the prototype, I actually went back to one person who was the head of management, who was administration head at my advertising agency, the one that I ran, Public Consulting Practice Group. And she's called Edith. I worked with Edith since she left college in 2007, 2008. When I was doing programming at broadcast station, she came in as an intern. She worked on one of my programs and she was pretty outstanding. And we offered her a job when she was done with college. And so we have like a partnership that has run over 17 years in different aspects. She's traveled outside the country, gone to do her double master's degree, but she came back home and I was like, let's complete what we started. Then while I was working with different clients, I ended up also engaging an actuarian scientist who would actually work with a lot of clients with regard to predicting sales, working the numbers, crunching the numbers. He's Steve. And I reached out to Steve and I said, look, I'm trying something here that's really unique. I will need to have a very good perspective of it. I will need to have a very good outlook of the numbers, because if we are going to do a tech business that's dealing with this, we need to have the right information. And so that's how both Steve and Edith came on board as co-founders of Safiri Salama. So basically between us, we share over 17 years of knowing each other, which made it a bit easier.
When it comes to funeral, the cultural sensitivity surrounding it is quite huge. So how do you approach, building trust with customers and communities over there in Kenya?
That's actually the key question to understanding this whole, to having what we are calling a death tech. Many people say we are Africa's first tech. I was discussing this with an anchor friend of mine because we want to do a radio campaign later on in the year. And the first thing he said, you're not going to use such words on my show. I use words like farewell. I have a morning show about death. However, I think the first thing that you learn, having worked in the advertising industry and the communication industry, the first thing you learn is tone. The other thing you learn is about understanding an audience. Nobody may want to talk about death up front, but many people may want to talk about memorializing people they love. If the language is love, it's different. It's easy. It's easy to talk about love. It's easy to talk about respect and honoring those who went before us. We normally have that in conversation. And that's exactly what the entire FINRO rite is. It's a rite of passage. The other thing that we did was to actually adopt policies on our platform that borrowed from our experience in communication. And one of it was the look and feel. If you look at the website Safiri Salama, the colors, the shade, the tone is not exactly what you'd find on a memorial website. It is basically warm, unlike when you look at most newspapers and when you look at pictures on the obituaries, the people really look dead. I mean, no disrespect, but we would like to celebrate people. And so we allowed people to actually upload pictures, profile pictures on the death notices they create. And if they're on the memorial, people create what look like albums. So basically it is a much more lighter version of looking. It's like you're looking at your Facebook page. So we adopted a design style that was warm. Then the other thing we did was we gave it a name. Safiri Salama is a common phrase in Swahili, which people use actually when bidding farewell to a loved one. Safiri Salama means go safely, travel safely, travel to the next world safely. So it's a phrase that people know. Okay. And the other thing we did was also, again, using our communication background to turn the products that we are offering the public, the services, into products. They're not tangible products, but we turn
Okay.
them into products in the sense of our Safiri Salama death notices even have a look and feel to them, a logo like a product. Memorials
Okay.
have their own logo as a product. Instead of calling this the yellow pages of death, our directory, we basically called it the red book, and created a site that was so warm and told a lot of the funeral service providers, we're offering you some, because they didn't even know how to advertise their products. Most of them will send you by WhatsApp pictures of coffins. We are like, no. How about if we create a mini website for you inside our website?
Okay.
So that when I come, I can go and look at, these are coffins. Aha. But when you click inside, you'll find companies. When you click some more, you'll find a company's profile, their working hours, a map leading to where they are, their unique selling points, and now even a catalog of the coffins they offer. And at the beginning, it was very important. We told them the quality of the pictures we'll accept have to be of a certain standard, like the way Amazon will do it. And they'll be like, no, I just take some phone pictures and send them. You say, no, those are not going on our website. So we even had to hire a cameraman to go and do pictures of their products so that we put them on our website so that they are warm and not dark gray pictures and stuff like that. But more importantly, will be our attitude. The people we hired, we emphasize on emotional intelligence. We had to evaluate who we hired, because you're working and you're meeting families at their worst time possible when they have lost someone. And you must have a level of emotional intelligence that works with this. The other thing was then partnerships. We had to resort to partnerships because in Africa, funerals are about communities. And so it's about tribes and clans. And one of the things you realize, it doesn't matter whether you are an atheist, whatever you are, even a gangster, you'll be buried by a priest or an imam. And so partnerships with religious organizations became part of what we're doing.
Okay.
Then one of the other things was also partnerships with funeral homes. And now we are looking at cultural organizations to partner. And the biggest thing we are talking about, this is not just about selling death care services. This is about storing memories of ourselves. So I guess the approach does matter in how you're communicating this very sensitive subject.
When it comes to doing business in Africa, funding is very important. And from my little research, that funding is quite a big challenge here in Africa. So can you share insight on how you were able to raise funds for Safiri Salama?
One of the things that we are going to confront very soon in Africa, it's the funding models that we have for startups, and which startups attract the most attention. Somehow, well, I'm not complaining, or maybe I am, we managed to raise our first $100,000 to actually complete the prototype from an angel investor. But the angel investor was a person, a Kenyan, who was known to us, who has settled in the US. And so was able to rally together some funding for us to actually do the prototype. And because they understood the culture and they understood the need, it was easy for them, even before the entire thing was out, to actually figure out this is going to be important. We in the diaspora pay for a lot of funerals back home. How do we actually know that the money we send is used for the correct purpose? How do we identify the suppliers that we need? How do we circulate the information on social media? But the problem that's about to happen, and which it's been happening, but now it's becoming critical, is that a lot of the funding that will go to startups in Africa will actually reflect the biases of the investors. The same way donor funding in Africa is done. it actually many times reflects the biases of the donor, in the sense of they use existing models, what they know. And so you will figure out that 80%, possibly 75 to 80% of the entire funding to Africa startups, as much as it reads on paper very nice, lots of hundreds of millions of dollars, most of them will go to fintechs. Because the story within the West and in Europe is that Africans are trying to find new ways of actually paying for, of trading and paying for services. And so fintechs are the place to go. Now, that creates a different problem, because in Kenya now we have over 50 fintechs, which doesn't make sense, because how many fintechs can one economy absorb, really? And so, so you have a situation like Kenya where Safaricom and M-Pesa basically is the biggest, possibly the biggest fintech that we have across this region. And over 98% of Kenyans use it. You pay bills, you pay for utilities, you pay for school fees, you pay, whatever it is that you want to do, you send money, you receive money, you fundraise, whatever it is you're trying to do, you can do it through that. However, now there are niche fintechs that have appeared all over, many of them replicating each other. But the donor funding, or rather the investor funding, seems to go there. So this whole aspect of having tech create these social impact platforms that will revolutionize a couple of other areas in Africa, like let's say the funeral industry in Kenya could be worth possibly about $500 to $600 million, and that's a very conservative estimate, because there are hundreds of services, but they are not documented as belonging to one industry. And so you end up with a situation whereby, since it's a gray area, you have a challenge with fundraising. So our initial bit, after doing the initial fundraising, we angel fundraising, we are going into pre-seed fundraising, but it is becoming quite a taxing exercise to actually explain to a lot of investors who cannot visualize that the funeral industry is actually one of the country's biggest. So what we've decided to do is actually to say, let us go on revenue mode. So we are working to actually raise our own revenue by executing different ways, working different funeral homes, getting some funeral homes to be pre-sellers or resellers of our services and stuff like that. There's a couple of things we're implementing, including which other areas do we delve into. There's funeral insurance, which is mostly static. So insurtechs are there, but you hardly see very, very innovative funding or insurance services that are in the funeral industry. So we've decided to go on revenue model, especially this year, to try and actually make a much more convincing case.
Technology is evolving rapidly. How do you see technology shaping your industry, and how is Safiri Salima planning to stay ahead in the market?
I think technology may be evolving, but I think the first thing we have to recognize is that the needs are the same. People need to grieve for their loved ones. What is now happening is that, one, we are on a timeline. Well, unless you're in Ghana, where a funeral will take 4, 5, 6 months. Across the rest of Africa, within 10 days, a person has been buried. This places enormous strain on a family. And you have to remember, funerals, being the biggest rites of passage, actually now demand a lot. One is about family pride. And you'll find it doesn't matter what kind of income, families try to put their best foot forward when it comes to organizing a funeral. What is actually to be focused on are the needs. The need is about time. Technology helps with the issue of time in terms of sourcing what you need. That is why you are able to actually do your entire shopping from your house if you have an e-commerce platform next to you. So in terms of time and the pressure of actually doing burials within a specific time, that will happen. So technology will shape that by making the services more competitive. So you no longer have few funeral homes who never declare their pricings. You no longer have few services. I mean, if you ask a lot of people what's the price of a coffin or a casket, they wouldn't know. And the reason they wouldn't know is that the companies that offer these services have never felt pressured to put out their products and the costings of those products. Now, across Europe, there's a movement right now to force funeral homes and funeral directors to be fair to people when they are bereaved. Because what this lack of information, people don't want to talk about death. But when somebody dies, they're helpless. They don't know much about what to do. This hands over the power to funeral homes and to funeral product suppliers, which means whatever they charge you is what you pay. Now we are having consumers who are questioning more. Did I get a fair deal? Was I taken advantage of? Technology will help solve that, because what we have on Safiri Salama now, if you go to our Red Book and you check, let's say, the coffin section, people actually now have their pricings there, which allows you to compare. This wasn't there before. You can compare flowers. You can compare a couple of services. You can compare mobile toilets. We are actually encouraging funeral homes to also put in their prices, even if not exact, but say from this range to this range is what they charge. A hearse, how much is a hearse? Nobody seems to tell you that unless you stumble on the first guy you talk to. He gives you a price and you have to pay. And then what technology will do, it will force suppliers to be, one, much more robust in how they present their products. Previously, we'll just send you a couple of pictures on WhatsApp and you figure out whether it's in a dark corner. Just figure out, pick up something. And what is the price? We'll tell you the price. Who do you compare that price with? Two, it will open up, technology will also open up the communication around the subject of death. One of the things that leads to exploitation and sometimes unfair treatment of bereaved families is a lack of information. And there is nobody advertising a service. There is nobody explaining to you a package that you'd have. There's no funeral director. You have to stumble around as family members and friends trying to figure something out. Technology puts out this product just like an e-commerce platform and enables people actually discuss them. The good thing about that is technology enables consumers become more demanding, and that puts pressure on people who supply funeral products to be much more accommodating.
Okay.
Then secondly, there is the issue of suppliers being much more competitive in their pricing. That's what technology will force. A third, there is, we'll have to go out of our way. I mean, you've seen the Ghanaian coffin industry. They've got very dramatic coffins. I mean, I've seen that. I mean, they will get the shape of a car, the shape of whatever else, a house or something like that. We look at it when you're in Kenya with a lot of fascination, like, wow. But even then, it is not a widely discussed subject. But imagine if you could actually go to different platforms where services, what is embalming? Very few people know what it is. And so when you go to a funeral home, you're supposed to indicate whether you want your person to be embalmed or not. But right now, whatever you are told is what you'll do. So what technology does, it provides us with more information and enables consumers be more demanding, be more understanding, and then express their preferences. But the other thing that it will do is to create more products for people. I'll give you an example. We normally treat people who sell coffins as witches, or whatever it is that they do. Now, what we will be doing is formalizing the death economy. And I know lots of people may take offense to what I say. I actually call it a funeral industry. I went to another funeral home and they said, you are the first person who has used the word funeral industry to us. What technology will do, it will enable a lot of more people invest in that industry, which will make it more competitive. If it's okay to actually sell more funeral flowers, make classy coffins, And this becomes something that is talked about. What it allows is more people to come into that industry without the stigma that the society attaches to them.
Considering your background, you are in communication and brand strategy. How do you approach marketing Safiri Salama to ensure both widespread and sensitive representation of your services?
As somebody who headed an advertising agency before and also worked on a lot of brand campaigns for different clients, one of the things that Africa suffers from is lack of homegrown brands. And I remember this was a subject at one of the first World Economic Forums, actually the first World Economic Forum to be held in Africa, which was in Cape Town, and which I attended. And the issue that came up is that out of all brands that are in Africa, less than 5% are homegrown. Africans love good brands. And one of the things that has happened since then is that we now have a lot of, other than just multinational brands, we actually have a couple of home brands growing from homegrown manufacturing. Our approach has been to create a brand that people can relate to. So brand development for us has been important. Creating Safiri Salama as a brand which can be trusted and which can be felt and which is presented in a way a mainstream brand can be presented. So how are the products presented? What is the look and feel? What are the stories that you tell about this brand? Do we do audience survey to understand? Because we've been out there and we figured out there were biases which were either, there were feelings or biases which were that are custom-oriented or culture-oriented. You have to adapt to them. And that's what our background enables us to do. We approach it like the way you'd approach a brand. Then you have to look at it as behavior change. Communities will plan for funerals. And at that time, no expenses are questioned. It is, I mean, you'd be a cheapskate and you're a terrible person if you're to even to try and negotiate about a coffin or question if a price looks unreasonable. What to do is to study that and engage behavior change campaigns to actually change a bit of that, yeah, it is okay to ask the price of a coffin. And if you find it unreasonable, it's also okay to check the competition. It doesn't make you a bad person. And then continuous product improvements. What we have in the market were common death notices, because we just have death notices like obituaries, which are static, both on radio and on TV and in the newspaper. Our whole idea is how do you make them much more robust, much more shareable on social media, much more interactive, allow people to leave tributes, allow people to lay a flower or light a candle, allow people to tell their own stories. Because Africans are good storytellers, just give them a platform to do that. So the biggest thing we've learned is we have to create a brand that is appreciated and that engages people at an emotional level, and that creates interactive products. So what we've learned from other products is what we need to deploy here, really. I mean, it is terrible that you would create a very flashy wedding program and the same person create the worst funeral program with the worst pictures, not cleaned up, badly told stories, and it's the same person. I mean, the appreciation of what consumers are saying is, I want quality, I want trendy, I want respectful. We need to deploy that to this industry. And that's what we bring, having worked in a brand building environment.
What are the strategies you have employed to ensure that Safiri Salama remains both convenient and affordable to your customers while maintaining a high level of profit in your revenue?
We have just gotten into the revenue stage. We're in 1 year into our beta version is a year old. It took us about 2 to 3 years to develop this platform. And so one of the things is that a digital platform, what it does, unlike print media costs, radio costs, and stuff like that, is that it actually allows you to price them cost effectively. While I'll give you a contrast, the smallest obituary in our mainstream newspaper, our leading newspaper, is about $150.
Okay.
$150? No, actually, it's about 200. No, it's $200. The smallest. And that's a 16th of a 16th of a page.
Wow.
In contrast, Safiri Salama's death notice. Safiri Salama's death notice is $20. So you can see what the contrast is. $200 for the smallest obituary you can get in a newspaper. And in our case, we are charging $20 for a death notice that you own, you can continuously update, you can share across social media platforms, you can put in several other links, and you only pay once. So price is going to be important with regard to that. Secondly, it will be about the cost to onboard is very simple. And then we had to make it mobile phone friendly. In Kenya, the mobile phone penetration is about 130%, meaning we have more mobile phones than people. So most people, compared to readership of newspapers and TV stations and radio stations, online consumption has become the biggest conveyor of information. And so we've made it simple. We made it mobile friendly, mobile responsive. You don't need passwords to log in. You can do OTP notification. One of the things we learned is how betting companies have penetrated through Africa. They have used the cell phone very effectively. It keeps the prices low when you have a digital platform, but it also makes it convenient for people to actually access your platform. Then you have to use mobile money. The modes of payment are very simple. In Kenya, M-Pesa penetration is 96%. So you basically have mobile money as a way of paying for your service. And then I guess the one thing that to keep it profitable now is to work with multiple partners on revenue sharing modes. And then work on models that are simple. Like if it's subscription, it has to be very basic. Netflix has penetrated through Africa because Netflix will charge what? Something close to $10, maybe $9 per month. So Africa has not developed the biggest subscription culture. So if you're going to have any product that's on subscription model, you need to keep those costs low. And then possibly allow those who want to have priority listing, let's say on the directory, or pay for their own space to come first and stuff like that, allow them to pay more, but keep the prices down. Because one of the things that's happening, and I'll tell you the truth, it's not that Africans don't have digital tools. In Kenya right now, we are looking at over 45% internet penetration. And we are looking at so many people having smartphones almost past the 50% mark. But you have many people with digital tools who have not embraced a digital culture. They'll use it to do WhatsApp, they'll use it to do Facebook, they'll use it to send money and receive money and buy stuff, but they won't use it to shop. The digital tools exist. So I think one of the things, it was a Nigerian writer who actually got to me when he said, the biggest success for African startups will be to offline people who have online tools. Does that make sense to
you? Online people who are offline with an online tools, right? That's what you said.
I have a smartphone, but I have never bought anything online.
People are scared of scammers. I know a lot of people, they are kind of, how will you know if what you are buying is original or they are not scammers? They have been there. Okay, for instance, Jumia has been in Nigeria for over 10 years. Why will I be the only one that will defraud of my money when there are millions of people who have bought from Jumia before now?
They may not trust a local product. And Jumia also has a lot to win with regard to trust because of vendors. The reasoning why I'm going back to what I said when you said, how do you hope to stay ahead? What is a strong brand? A strong brand has confidence, has trust, has testimonials that back it, has a mechanism. It is like on our platform, the Red Book, you cannot list without being vetted. If you're selling a casket, we will allow you to apply to be listed. We will allow you to actually open an account, but we will not publish the account until we verify that you actually exist. That is what we hope to build as a strong brand, so that it is verifiable. So it will be very important to ensure that to grow an online populace, because people have online tools, they have online gadgets, but they have not fully adopted the online culture, except in some cases. When it comes to Western Union, they will use it. MoneyGram, they will use it. PayPal, they will use it. eBay, they will buy stuff from there. But you know why? Those are strong brands that tell you every time you buy from us, what you're buying is verifiable. The supply you're dealing with is verifiable, and we've got rules to deal with this. We want to make this the same. On our funeral platform, right now, if you do a death notice, we have to verify that the death is actually linked to a funeral home, so that we don't have a fake death notice. So building a brand requires the brand's reputation to be built in the way it conducts its business, in the way it treats customer complaints, and in the way it manages its customer service. That's why I said the biggest thing we've learned from our background is we must build a strong death care brand.
Can you share with me an example of customer success story or a particular meaningful experience that highlighted the positive impact of Safiri Salama, on a family, on a community?
Yes, I can. The first successful story is myself. And this is because, remember when I started, I actually told you one of the challenges for my son was, why isn't granddad online? You remember that?
Yes.
So what our platform does, both on death notices and on memorials, is that when you open a memorial on our platform, it gives you a distinct URL address that Google can find. So as we speak now, if you are to Google up, if you are to allow me to even do a small presentation to you, would you mind doing that?
Yeah, that would be cool.
Okay, so let me do some presentation if you allow me. This will be share. Can I share a screen?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so here we go. So my father's name prior to 2019 or 2018, before I started this experiment, he did not exist online. But after Safiri Salama, he was the first customer that we input. So that now if you are to check, my father's name is Benjamin Nyongesa Wanyonyi. If you are to search for him, Safiri Salama picks him up. If you are to even check the images, Google now knows who he is. That explains the beard story. That's why I have a beard, because the original Nyongesa scene that did. So if I was now to look at his picture and visit, guess where it will take me? It will take me to his page on Safiri Salama.
Safiri Salama website.
Yes, that is where my father's website, memorial website is. You can see how many people have visited it, 1,648. You can see the notice board. The last time we did a memorial event for him was 2020. So that's his album there.
Wow.
And every year we do, every year we actually do. I sometimes go there to write him messages on Father's Day. And that is, you know, we'll like tributes there and stuff like that. And this is actually my son who started this whole story. Jason Ray laid a flower and said, rest in peace, my dear grandfather. Boris will leave. So I'm the first beneficiary of this whole story, that I was able to immortalize my own father. I had a friend who, when I discussed this idea with, and in the first 1-2 years, we were actually giving out free death notices, free memorials. We still have a mix of that even this year, just to make sure more people experience this. So I had asked him whether I can give him a free memorial for his father. He's actually a famous broadcasting colleague. And he was very touched because we were having lunch. So I showed him the website, and he walked me down to his car after we finished lunch. And he said, I need you to see something. And on the dashboard of his car was his father's picture. And he said, John, my father died before I was 10. 55 right now. I keep sometimes forgetting what he looks like. So I keep his picture on my dashboard every day to remind myself. And I said, you don't have to just work with the picture. You could have him on a memorial website that can be accessed by all your relatives across the world, because he said, my relatives are in 3 continents. And there's so many children named after my father who don't actually know him, because most of the hard pictures, the hard copy pictures, are kept by my mother. And we only get to look at the album again during my dad's memorial. But remember, this was 40-something plus years ago. So by creating a memorial website on our platform, he said, what you have done, there are tens and tens of young descendants of my father and his brothers, kids and stuff, and our entire family who are now able to actually access this man and access his memory wherever they are, via a phone, via a laptop. I met a Google representative who I was discussing this issue with, and they said, John, I don't think you're building a death care platform. You're actually building an African library, because to the best of my knowledge, Africans don't write their stories when they're still alive. You mostly write them when you're dead. And which is actually funny, but true, that most of our histories are contained in something we call the funeral program. That's when it's written, he came, he married, he went to this school. But where do those copies actually go? We lose them. And we lose the pictures as well. So this person told me, John, you're actually building an African library. And I think this was like 2 years ago. It gave me a very good outlook of what it is we are trying to do here. And third, I think, I don't know whether this will be appropriate, but since we are in our beta version, we have a mixture of both paid and free death notices and free memorials and paid for memorials. We won't mind actually giving you a taste of what it looks like by gifting you a 2-year subscription for your mother. For you, because the truth of the matter is, my daughter, who was born in 2012, acts like she knows my father, who died in 2003, but it's simply because of the website and it's because of the platform. She can access him. She knows what he looks like. She teases my beard. You know, you look like grandpa. But where did she get that information from? So it would be nice to consider doing that for your beloved mother as well. And we at Safiri Salama would like to actually give you that. We think in the next 1 or 2 years, we will consider coming into the Nigerian market. We want to do a Kenyan market fit to understand how to work, how to monetize it, and how to keep its cost low. And then also understand culture of different people. So that's what I would say, that we actually have a chance of ensuring that we do something better There's a Sudanese, we gave this to. There's a South African, we gave this to. There's a Zambian, we gave this to. There's a Ugandan, we gave this to. Because actually you can operate it. It can operate multi-country. Even though right now it is Kenya specific, but it allows you to input information from different countries on it. That we think it's an experience that we can share as Africans, in the sense of it is not about remembering the dead. It is about celebrating the memories of those who came before us. Of those who came before us, because how do you know who you are unless you know where you came from?
From what you have said, you have vast experience in different industries. What principles or values do you believe are crucial for creating a collaborative and driven environment at Safiri Salama?
As I said earlier, just the same way we pick our partners, or the same way I reached out to my co-founders, it is emotional intelligence is an important aspect, because we are dealing with a very sensitive subject and people walking through very sensitive times. And we're also dealing culture. I mean, there is culture surrounding the conversations around death. And so you are not going to do a commercial promotion. You're going to do storytelling. But I think the most important for us, because one of the first things is exactly how we train our team, is you have to have the willingness to be a change maker. That's really critical. And that's not negotiable. We don't just want guys who treat this as a job. Okay. We want people who think we will change the way we do things, and we look for that aspect in the people we interview. We also look at the sense of adventure. You see, to be in Africa's first death tech is adventurous. And you have to have the drive to know what you're providing is such an important service, but you'll have to navigate a lot of glances and a lot of uneasiness to get there. But if you are keen on making change happen, you'll have to go through that experience. And then we actually are looking for people who have empathy. This is not just business. And some of the features we inbuilt into our system are actually more about what would a bereaved person want? What will somebody celebrating memorial of somebody want? What is someone who's planning a funeral need? There's a sense of empathy that must be there in the team for you to actually understand this is not just about a sale.
What are your future plans and aspirations for your company?
Just create a market fit in Kenya, build the team. Initially, fundraising was at the top of our list, but right now it is not. And the next thing is actually become a revenue generating startup. This is important because it forces you to actually worry about and care about what you do. Is it bringing value to someone, and is someone willing to pay for it? That is really important. But apart from that, create a Kenyan market fit and then scale outside Kenya, because we share a lot of similar cultures across Africa. And the thing is, the way we actually treat death is almost similar in different communities across Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa. And so for us, it is like expand this. Then we would like to, in the near future, and then just focus on building a strong brand, because this, you have a market in which, even in Nigeria today, if you are to ask, I want to buy a coffin, or I want a hearse, or I want a condolence book, if you were in any other industry, the first thing somebody would ask is, what brand are you buying? True or not true?
True.
Now, within the industry, the death industry, there is no brand. So we are trying to build a death care brand that people embrace. And our future plan after doing a market fit is also to see which other aspects of the funeral industry can we scale into. And as I said, there are several. There's insurance, there is funeral homes, there is cemeteries, there is data, and we want to build a brand that can scale outside Kenya, but also scale beyond this initial phase that we're doing. That's actually what our plan is.
What advice can you give to Africans who are looking to start their business, or who are just starting their business?
Wow, that's so interesting. It varies who's asking, but I think the two things that are important that I have learned myself. Let me just share what I know. One, it amazes me how much people can tout or declare that a particular venture or a particular line of business or a particular project is so important to them, and yet spend the least time finding out anything about that business. You must understand the business. I have worked with several industrialists, and one of the things I observed was they knew the area they were in, they read about the area, they talked to other players in the industry, because the one thing that you must come and offer in a market to be distinct is you must offer a better product. And you can't offer a better product if you don't know what that industry does or what it's going through. So the biggest thing will be, whatever it is you want to do, you must be able to spend as much time to understand what that industry looks like. And I think the other thing that, and this, it's not an original thought, but it works for everyone. It's the same thing like what the founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, says. Ideas never come out fully formed. When this started off as a memorial for my father, I had no idea that years later would actually be looking at an African first and all-inclusive platform that actually is thinking about a bigger venture ahead. So ideas never come out fully formed, but if you work on them, you will see the next step. If you don't work on them, you'll never see the next bend. I think people want to see the entire end-to-end picture. I think you must start. And in starting in this, we understood the market, we understood empathy, we talked to funeral homes, I've talked to morticians, I've talked to embalmers, I have talked to coffin makers. We have met so many people, we now can see where the next bend is. If we had never started, the idea did not come out fully formed.
Thank you for creating our time to be on Today Africa podcast, and I do appreciate you for creating our time. Before you go, I do normally ask my guest quick 6 questions. So, are you ready for it? What is the African country that you want to visit this year?
Nigeria.
Why?
The field that I'm in right now, their cultures are so robust and they are loud, even though they still suffer from the rest of us about this silence around the subject, but they're very robust. 2, proudly African. That's what you can call Nigeria. So if you actually want to see what else you can see outside, to see yourself outside Kenya, or to reflect what we actually think about ourselves, Nigeria is a very good example. And 3, they're just robust as a people and very competitive too. And I actually believe that an African brand that walks into Nigeria and survives is a truly African brand.
What is the most underrated Kenyan food?
I would say githeri, or it's actually a mixture of maize, beans, potatoes, and possibly a few veggies in there. It's very nutritious. I actually have it for breakfast sometimes because it actually has starch, it has carbs, it has proteins, and it has it has the entire mix. But people rather have them separately. But this is I would say maize, a mixture of maize beans. We call it githeri. It's actually I think the most underrated food.
How do you look after yourself in your free time?
I read and I surf a lot. One of the things the internet, I've almost said that the internet was invented for me, or I exist with it. The thing is, I read a lot about different experiences in different countries. It makes me an international citizen, but it also allows me to actually see other perspectives. So that's my free time. I would read a specific subject as work, but I like delving into the unknown when I'm free, in terms of just enriching my mind. And the other thing is, at 53, as I said, I'm an old techie, so I do exercise.
What has been your most humbling moment in your journey as an entrepreneur?
I think failures. I started I started an IT platform in 2008 to actually provide women's outfits. It failed because, as one woman said, "You're selling things to women. How much do you understand about women?" And it was a very simple question, but it was a very loaded question. And what she actually was asking me was, do you know that while you think you're selling outfits, lingerie and stuff, I was trying to create a Victoria's Secret kind of thing. And it was like,
okay,
you know what we feel when we do specific things. And unless you understand that, you'll never sell it to us. And I didn't listen very well. The business didn't do well. There were simple things. At that point, people didn't trust online. At that point, women hardly buy their inner garments unless they can touch them and feel the fleece. And there's a lot. It says something about them. I mean, half the time they're like, women dress for men. No, they don't. And it's not just any new idea is a good idea. It brought in a couple of new things. And it costs a lot of money. But it was a very good learning curve when she asked, what do you know about women? And it's been quite a question every time I'm trying something. What do you know about the people you're trying to give this service to? It has worked for me, actually worked in my favor. But it was humbling because as a man, their first reaction is, what do you mean? Every man knows about women. Not really.
Do you watch football?
I watch football.
Which football club do you support?
Arsenal.
What's one thing you would like people to know about you?
I'm very passionate. I can't do anything that I'm not passionate about. I sometimes go overboard with it, but I work from both the head and the heart. I must be passionate about something for it to make sense to me. Whether it's friendship, it is work, it is a project, it's a relation, it doesn't matter what it is. I must have passion for it.
Thank you so much, sir. I do appreciate your time. God bless you.
You too, sir. Have a very good afternoon.
Today Africa Podcast is a podcast series where we interview African entrepreneurs and professionals and share the stories behind their businesses. In each interview, we ask how they got started, how they grew, and how they run their business today. The stories are inspiring and also provide specific advice and insight into starting a business. By sharing these stories, we want to help others get started.